Okay, welcome to segment 3 lecture. The timing couldn't be more appropriate for this section if I planned it, and naturally I did not. But as we begin this segment, we are also in the midst of an enormous moment with the Kavanaugh nomination for Supreme Court Justice. So if you have been following the news at all, Judge Kavanaugh has been nominated by President Trump to be the Supreme Court Justice nominee to replace Kennedy upon his retirement. And there was a lot of debate about the Kavanaugh throughout the Kavanaugh hearings. He has not released as much information as earlier Obama nominees, and that was up for debate. And there was also a lot of questions about kind of just his testimony and so on and so forth. But then last week, a professor came forward alleging that Judge Kavanaugh attempted to rape her in high school. And so that has caused a whole nother layer to this Kavanaugh hearing, and a layer that mimics exactly what we are talking about in this segment, which is sexual harassment. Of course, it's not technically considered sexual harassment in the case of the Professor Ford and Kavanaugh, because of course we're talking about a scenario that's more in line with date rape because they were both students. But like Hill and Clarence Thomas, we have this moment where a nominee's sexuality, sexual behavior, and just general behavior and judgment is being called into question around issues of sex and sexuality. And so, it's a really opportune moment to both understand what went on during the Hill-Thomas hearings, or as some people call it, confrontation, because they weren't really a hearing, and what's going on right now with Kavanaugh and Professor Blasey Ford. So I would definitely encourage you, and I'll be trying to post as many links to the news as I can, but I would encourage you all to follow the news as well. So I have posted the reading notes for this segment. I'm just looking at them on my computer screen. Sorry to be looking away. This segment is sort of discrimination part 1, but it specifically talks about sexual harassment. And we think about what is discrimination. Gender discrimination is basically unequal treatment against people or groups of people on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender. It also goes towards nationality and religion. But for, and that is the way it was defined under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that was passed in 1964. The comment often made about gender is that a senator threw sex or gender in at the last moment, hoping to derail the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but it passed anyway. So that's always an interesting little tidbit. Look through the reading notes. There's some detailed definitions of what we're talking about when we talk about discrimination. So there's disparate treatment, right, which was defined by the Supreme Court in 1977 as a moment where an employer will intentionally choose to treat someone in a discriminatory fashion on the basis of their race, color, religion, sex, national origin, right? So as a Jew, I'm a Jew, an employer knows that I'm Jewish and refuses to hire me on the basis of being Jewish or being a woman or being a female Jew. These things are often very difficult to prove, but that is an example of disparate treatment. Disparate impact is more when there is a wide-ranging impact of policy, right? So employment practices, rules, and procedures that appear neutral, but have an impact on groups in a disproportionate way. So examples, and they cannot be justified by business necessities. So what would be some examples of those? You could say it was discrimination based on, you begin to notice a pattern where women are not being promoted, or mothers are not being promoted. That the fact is that there could be both an employment practice that's not necessarily a policy, so not something that's necessarily written down, but there's a past practice of a trend in which women and mothers specifically are being passed over for promotions. And the argument that those who are being passed over is that they're being discriminated against because they're women or potential mothers or mothers, and that they won't be able to give 110% to their employment. That would be one example, which is often an example that's given. So you begin to understand, and this is discussed in the Goodman readings as well. So it's important to understand that. So for the purpose of this segment, we're talking about gender discrimination broadly. We're talking more specifically about sexual harassment. So what is sexual harassment? In the notes, I outline it in detail.